So I thought we'd start by talking about, in the beginning, how I started, when I became overwhelmed and what that meant, some decisions and changes that I felt were necessary, challenges that I faced in doing so, and the benefits that resulted from delegating. So I started, like many of you, where I had a vision. I wanted to open a bookkeeping company. I did a lot of research about it, did my due diligence, created my business plan, and started from ground zero. I did not have any clients on the side. I was not doing this, as kind of a hobby at first. I had a corporate job doing accounting in the corporate world, as well as account management and things of that nature. And I never had experienced networking. I sat in my corporate office, and I obviously grew relationships within the company, but I never attended a chamber event. I never attended a yellow tie event. I didn't even know what that was all about. Never had to do that. I wasn't in sales. So I set out with my business plan, ground zero, and took off. Things went well, and soon enough I found myself in this position. I don't have time to be this busy. I'm sure a lot of you guys experienced this, and it was a matter of the business was growing, and I was wearing all the hats, doing 100% of everything. I did all the client communication. I did all of the bookkeeping work. I did all the administrative pieces. I did my own accounting work, and so on and so forth. There was really no marketing going on. I didn't even really think out that process of it, aside from the fact I was involved in networking. That's how I started growing my business, was just growing relationships and building relationships with others to gain referrals. But as far as an actual marketing plan or a strategic plan for the business, I had my original one, but I really never had time to get back and to review that and to move forward with it. So at this point in time, when I found myself this busy, and it wasn't just with work, it was with family life as well, all coupled together, and I found I was spending a lot of time in the evenings when I should have been spending it with my children and my husband. I was still working. So I decided I had two options. At this point in time, I could decide that I was at my max capacity and I was just no longer going to take on new business, and I was just happy with where I was, and financially and workload-wise, that's as far as it was going to go. So therefore, I would be a little less overwhelmed because I knew I wasn't going to do the more networking. I wouldn't have to put in that extra time to grow the business. That wasn't for me. The other option was to grow the business, which meant I had to have help. I couldn't continue doing everything on my own. So I chose to grow. I wanted to grow the business. I wanted to continue to see it flourish. I wanted to bring on new business. I love the newness of working with different industries and different clients because that personally helps me grow, helps me learn how other people are doing it. It helps me learn different industries and how they run their businesses, and I love that aspect of it. So growing was the definite best choice for me. But with this came a lot of change. And with that change came challenges. The challenges that I experienced with this was, up until this point, I was the only one who contacted my clients. I was the sole communicator. I was the sole person who did all the work. And the idea of letting go and having someone else have a part in building and growing that reputation scared me to death. I did not want anybody else having that conversation with my client. I wanted to make sure that I was the one on board with it. I knew how they felt. I knew that everything was done was at the quality I wanted it to be, the timeliness, the accuracy that I wanted it to be. But with doing it that way, I would not be able to grow. I had to find a way to let go. So how I approached this challenge initially was myself. I talked to myself a lot. Okay? Who in this room can admit I have a lot of conversations with myself when it comes to business, right? I think a lot of us do that, right? Whether you admit it or not, I think those little voices in your head, you have those conversations. I was my biggest challenge. Not the fact that I had to find an employee, not the fact that I had to, train and develop processes around that change. I was the biggest challenge of saying, I'm okay to do this. I knew I wanted to do it, but I had to be okay with taking those steps to do it. So slowly but surely, hired that first employee. And just to give you an idea of how much I didn't want to let go of that control, even though I knew it was necessary, I'll give you a little example of how the first day went. New employee shows up. I'm all excited. We talk about the business, kind of my vision for it. So she's on board with kind of where I'm headed, what I want to do, what I want to accomplish, some processes we're going to need to put into place to accommodate her doing some of the bookkeeping work and me continuing to do some of the work. And we talked about a couple clients I wanted her to get started with, sent her back to her desk so she could review what we had discussed, start doing some of the entries, take a look at the QuickBooks file, etc. And within a few moments, the phone rang. I immediately reach over to grab the phone. She had already picked it up. I am back in my office, have a mini panic attack of, oh my gosh, we didn't talk about answering the phone. Does she even know what to say? Does she know what to do? Now, how ridiculous is that, right? How ridiculous is that? And thankfully, I can say within seconds, I said that to myself. Lori, you hired her because you don't need to be the one answering the phone every time it rings. You don't need to be the one doing all the data entry. You hired her to handle that. And if you didn't feel that she had the skill set and the professionalism to answer the phone, you shouldn't have hired her. And obviously, she did a great job. She answered it very professionally, handled the call. It was all said and done, and I didn't have to do it. But it just goes to show that even such a simple thing like that was a real big deal at that moment. Thankfully, I quickly got over it and moved on, but it was a big deal at that time. So for those of you out there who are at that point and struggling with handing over for the first time and delegating, it's okay to feel that way. As long as you're having those realistic conversations with yourself as well, that it's okay. The other way I handled this challenge was I found that since I was the biggest challenge, it was going very slow. I had delegated quite a bit, freed up my schedule, brought in new clients, things were going well, but I was still holding on to a lot of things that I really shouldn't be doing. So I sought consulting help, and I wanted an outside perspective on how I could be delegating better. I hired Kathy Sexton, the productivity expert, to come in so that I could get that outside perspective to really identify what my natural style was and where I wanted to, the role I wanted to have within the company. Was that in line? It was, which was very encouraging to me to know that I was able to identify with that and know my natural style is the strategic piece of it. Running and growing the business, not doing the daily bookkeeping entries every single day. So having that assurance was a great step. And then having the outside perspective to question what I felt I could not let go of was fantastic, because she really made me think about why do I feel like I am the only one who can do that, and what things can we put in place so I don't have to feel like that. By hiring an outsourced consultant like that, an outside consultant, I was able to move much faster in getting myself through that process of being okay with delegating. The things that helped the most was setting up processes and systems so that I know, even though someone else is doing the work, I can monitor it. I know everybody's doing it consistently. I know the results should be, very consistent and where I want them to be with the accuracy and the timeliness. So by having those systems in place, I could relax and know I didn't let it go. I'm no longer a part of it. I'm just not the one doing the daily work of it. I'm still monitoring it and managing it. So that was a big help to me, because I'm a process-driven person, but I was too close to it myself to see some of those things that I could be doing to help move that process along. With that came the benefit of growth. By by delegating those tasks, it freed me up to really focus on my strategic plans for the business, forecasting out where I wanted to be. It also helped me realize that this is a continuous process, because as soon as I did this and I delegated and I saw this growth, what happened? I'm back to here. This cycle repeats over and over and over. It's not a one and done type situation. So as I grew and I took on more tasks that I wanted to be, such as the strategic development and those types of things, I found myself right back here. But I would evaluate and say, all right, what do I have on my plate now? For instance, I'm working on a more complete marketing plan. Well, I'm putting that together. I'm developing it. I'm outsourcing the specific pieces of it to help put together, but I'm not going to be the one actually doing the work for all of those stages. Okay? So again, came the change. What do I need to delegate of this? What pieces do I have a part in? What systems am I going to put in place to monitor it? And what am I going to delegate? Brought through those challenges on some things of, do I need to hire? Do I need to outsource it? Or do I just need to provide more training to my staff and better communicate what my expectations are for that specific task? And again, we come back to growth. The other thing I want to point out about the benefit is my work-life balance. As I mentioned in the beginning, that was getting a little out of control. And I really felt as though my kids were going to see me as the home improvements guy, Wilson. Do you guys remember that show years ago? Wilson was the guy behind the fence, right? You only saw this part of him, ever, right? I felt like that's what my kids are going to know me, behind my laptop. Sitting on the couch, working at home at night, that's how my kids are going to know me, is just my eyes behind my laptop. And I didn't want that. I have many years still with my kids. They're little, and I want to make sure I enjoy that time with them. By delegating, it allowed me to have that time to spend more time with them in the evenings, on the weekends, and when work is done, it's done. Not to say as a business owner that there aren't times I work late at night or on the weekends, but it's not every single day anymore. It's only when it's extremely important. I wanted to show this because it's one thing to talk about growth. It helped me grow my business, but I wanted to show you. This is my actual growth pattern with my business. And as I said, I started ground zero. 2008 is when I opened my business. I landed my first client about July of 2008. So I don't have 2008 on here because it was just a partial year and I had all of maybe 2 clients that year. But as you can see, I started off very low, but thankfully with the business model and the way I ran my business, my revenue exceeded my expenses from the beginning, but there was a very small profit there. But as you can see, as time went on and I began to delegate and hire staff, significant changes started to occur. For instance, in 2010, you see those lines come a little closer together, not much, but that's when I hired my first admin to help me with the scanning and filing. 2012 comes closer together because that's when I hired my first bookkeeper to help with that work. And you can see as I delegated and moved on, look at how that jumped, the spread between revenue and expenses. Tremendous jump from where I was all along, and a continuous growth in what those revenues are. But seeing the difference between is where it really made a difference. And that continued on in 2014 when I hired another part-time bookkeeper to assist, and 15 is really where I'm starting to see that growth from it. So I wanted to show you a realistic look at how it's improved my business. So what questions do you have for me? I really think, you first have to evaluate what things are on your plate, and if you have 100% of everything, I think the easiest thing to start with are the administrative tasks, because those are the things that you should be able to hire anybody who has that skill set to write letters for you, help manage the emails, your schedule, et cetera. Things of that nature can really help. And what you have to look at is what tools, such as Will's going to be doing the business approved apps. So what tools are in place that can help you share information so that that person can help you with those steps. But then training and putting a system in place to monitor it and have the communication lines open is huge. That's where I was lacking, and now I have weekly meetings with my staff in addition to other touch points so that I keep apprised on the status of my clients and where things are going and any challenges they face. Yes? Yeah, because literally for a while, even when I had the first bookkeeper in place, I had a part-time admin and a bookkeeper who was standing at the shredder shredding documents still. Me. Not necessary. There's no reason I should have been the one doing that, and that's exactly why. Yes?
I'm curious about your revenue and expense chart. Did you include in that the value of your labor?
No, so this was just what it was without me in there. Yeah, yeah.
So what did you delegate you wish you had?
Nothing. I have not delegated anything that I wish I hadn't. There's been nothing, yes?
What kind of systems did you put in place to monitor the quality?
So the systems to monitor the quality is, there's review processes in place along the line. So when a bookkeeping client goes through our process, we have checklists and processes to say what was done here. Then there's a review process, which was on my plate and now is on my main bookkeeper's plate. She reviews the file before any reports or anything goes out to the client. And then on a periodic basis, she and I meet and we review the files at that point in time. The only reviews I do in depth are typically if reporting needs to go out for financial reasons, not just a management review, but for financial reasons and taxes. And then she and I sit together and do an absolute complete review of everything. And that is also dwindling away because I now see and know her level of skill and what she's looking for, that when I get it, there's nothing to see. You know, there's nothing to correct or change. But putting in those checkpoints where I have that involvement, that's what's helped me the most. And I know timeliness, we meet weekly to talk about priorities. So I know the timeliness is kept because we're talking about that and making sure, you know, and they put that together, not me. They tell me what's on their plate. They tell me what's coming up and when they're going to work things. So that way, if something pops up on my side, I can address it and say, well, let's, you know, bump this one, add this, change this, however. But they're responsible for that, and I've empowered them to do that piece of it and then communicate with me. Dale.
Yeah, part of.
I really looked for someone who was similar to me as far as my values go. And although I didn't fully realize that at the time, looking back, that's what I was looking for. Because I knew if it was important to me to treat a client a certain way, to take ownership of the work I was doing, if someone else possessed those qualities, I'm not going to have to worry so much about it. I can provide training on the specific skills. Click this button in QuickBooks, click that button, file documents this way in this format. But I can't teach the person how I want them, you know, to treat a client and what's important as far as that goes. So that's what helped me the most in hiring, was looking for someone who shared those values and would treat the clients and take ownership of their workload like I do. And being a small business, it was extremely critical that they felt that involvement, you know, that they were a part of that. So that they could, you know, participate and be a part of the company and not just, I'm given this task, I do it, and I'm done. Brian? No, I think that part has actually been pretty smooth. Where I have gotten some pushback, and it wasn't real pushback, but you could see attitudes were kind of like, do we have to do this, was like for the weekly meetings. I asked them to, you know, kind of schedule out what do you have going on this week? Who are we working on? What are we waiting on? What challenges are we facing with certain clients this week? Where do we need to follow up? I asked that they put that together, and then we discuss it in our meeting. And with that, it was kind of, something else we have to do type of thing. But I can tell you after the first couple weeks of doing it, they're all on board, and they see the benefit of doing that because now they've got better focus on what's going on during the week. Okay? So we need to wrap it up. I'll be available afterwards for any additional questions. But in summary, I started wearing all the hats, became very overwhelmed with that, and realized I had to make some decisions. And the decision I made led to changes that had to occur. And those changes brought challenges of how to delegate, when to delegate, but the benefits of the work-life balance and the continuous growth was well worth it. And the thing I want to leave you with the most is it's a never-ending process. Never think that it's a one and done where you can sit down and say, hey, I got the stuff off my plate, I'm done. Because the moment you do, we all have a list a mile long that we want to get to. So as soon as you delegate and get it off your plate just piles up with other things. And you have to constantly review that and say, should I be doing every piece of this, or is there some things here I can delegate either to an employee, an outsourced provider, et cetera? And I'd like to leave you with this quote from Robert Half. I think he just nailed it. Delegating work works, provided the one delegating works too. So when we talk about delegating, you don't just hand it off and run away and go on, you know, on a safari for the rest of the year. You take on other work, and you're a part of that with your employees or your outsource providers, et cetera. So thank you very much for your time here today.